Okay. So let's get started. I told Myra and Becky that I'm really nervous. So I'm just going to put that out there. Mainly because this is just not something that is talked about. And I feel like it should be. And what originally inspired kind of my desire to host this Zoom call, several different things transpired. But most recently, I'm in kind of a mastermind group with about 5 other diamonds. And none of them are from oily families. And one of them actually retired her husband earlier this year. And she was coming to the group and sharing her story about how difficult that had been on their marriage. And I remember her words, and she said this, and the words just struck me. She said, "Nobody told us it was going to be this hard." And I went, "Yep, exactly. Totally been there. Nobody told me." Myra, I think we've kind of talked about it, but I mean, no one really prepares you for what it's going to be like, because we glamorize it in our minds. We're like, oh, retiring my husband must be this amazing, perfect dream. And, hey, life is good and he's going to be home and we'll live happily ever after. And that's just not the reality. And so I feel like there's huge value in coming to you and just being really transparent and just kind of sharing our stories and some of the struggles that have come along with it. Please don't take it as us complaining, because we know that we are incredibly blessed and we are so grateful to even be in this position. Trust me. But as your upline and as your leaders, like, we want you guys to know the truth and what you might expect if this is a goal for you. And if you're here tonight, maybe it is a goal for you, or maybe you're just totally curious and you just want to know what it's like to actually retire your spouse, and the good, the bad, the ugly, which is what I mentioned on the post. So we're going to talk about that. I also want to mention that there are a lot of leaders in oily families that could talk about this topic. There's a lot of husbands that are home, and not just at the diamond level. We have platinum and gold husbands that have been able to come home. And if I had asked everybody to be on this Zoom call, it would be like a 6-hour Zoom call. So I figured 3 was a good number. But ask people, like, if you know someone who's retired their spouse, don't be afraid to ask them about the hard stuff too. Because I think everybody just assumes that it's all awesome all the time. And trust me, it's not. Retiring your husband, I remember hearing this term kind of thrown around in our industry, not necessarily in the Young Living crowd, but in the MLM world. Women that are top earners like to throw out that term, "Oh, I'm going to retire my husband," or "I retired my husband." And what's funny is I used to say that. And now when I hear those words, I literally cringe. Okay? I cringe. I'm like, do you really want to do that? I don't know. And I'll tell you why. So I'm going to share kind of what happened. I know not all of you know me or my situation with my husband. His name is Troy. And he actually worked in the IT consulting industry for a little over 7 years. So a good chunk of our marriage. We've been married for, it'll be 13 years in November. We're a blended family, so that has many challenges in and of itself. And so we each had a child coming into our marriage, and then we had 2 together. So when he was working in that capacity, he was traveling every single week. He traveled about 50 weeks out of the year. And he was vice president of business development for his company. He grew a company, and then it sold, and then he grew another company, and it sold. And he was very much in demand in his industry in IT consulting. So him traveling every single week was just our norm. Like, it was just what we did. And it got old. Believe me, it got old. He missed out on a lot of family things. I remember him missing birthdays. I remember him missing milestones. He missed, Christmas programs, things like that are pretty important. And it was hard. Where was I here? I'm turning off my dings that are distracting me. Sorry, you guys. I remember giving birth to my youngest, and this was back when Blackberries were still the big thing that everybody used. And I remember after delivering him, and I was like in the recovery room, Troy was on his Blackberry, like answering emails, and then went outside in the hall to take a call. Like he had a very demanding, high stress job, and I'll never forget that. I did not appreciate that. Now, because of how hard he worked, we had actually gotten completely out of debt. So we were living debt-free, and we were fairly comfortable at that point. We didn't have an excess of money, but we were in a good place. I'll just put it that way. And I want to actually throw this out there as a tip. My personal opinion is that nobody should consider retiring their spouse if you have debt. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say. I think it's important to get that out of the way first. So like I said, we were comfortable, we were debt-free, but our family life was just chaotic. And I was pretty much in survival mode all the time with him gone. And it fueled my desire to build this Young Living business. And I remember saying in the years kind of leading up to this, that something has to give. And like, I can't do this anymore. I'm at the end of my rope. I didn't get married for this kind of lifestyle because I was a single mom before I met Troy and felt very much like a single mom a lot of the time with him gone, although there's really no comparison because I was not the breadwinner. So I know single moms. I have a special place in my heart for them, and it's a really difficult position to be in. He was very good at his job, and people appreciated him a lot and told him that. He was very valued in his position with his company. I wouldn't say that he loved his job because he wasn't out like changing the world. He was selling consulting services. He didn't love it, but it definitely gave him some fulfillment because he felt that value and he felt that respect. And I think for many men, their career becomes a huge part of their identity, even though it's not supposed to, it just does. So, you can imagine what happened when that's stripped away all of a sudden. So I remember telling him that I wanted to bring him home after convention in 2013, and I had read The 4-Year Career, which totally fueled my fire. And it was kind of a fun challenge. I was like, hey, I think I can do this. Like, I want to surpass your income. I want to bring you home. And at that point, he was so stressed out from his job and the constant travel, which might sound glamorous, but trust me, getting on planes every week and sleeping in a strange bed, every week is not fun. And so because of that, he was like, okay, sure, go for it. And I think he was a little skeptical, but he kind of, challenged me and said, okay, let's see if you can do it. And I knew the number that I would need to bring him home, and it was going to need to be a pretty big number. And that number for me came at Diamond. It came at a Diamond check, not even my first Diamond check. And it didn't feel real. I will say those first few Diamond checks don't feel real. And I think Becky and Myra can relate to that. So we waited a few months till we got like 3 more checks under our belt. And we're like, okay, I guess money isn't going anywhere. And he actually gave notice with this company right around the time of his 40th birthday.
I gotta go put this in the
It was kind of a big joke. It was like, happy birthday, honey. You're turning 40. You get to put in your notice now. So that's what he did. And honestly, our family thought we were crazy. He retired before his own father retired from his career. So that's a little weird. My father-in-law retired only 2 years ago. Also, his colleagues in his industry really didn't understand what he was doing and probably thought he was crazy as well. And here's what I want to make really clear to you guys. This was our mistake. We had no plan going into this at all. None. Like, We just wanted to escape the chaos of him traveling all the time, but there was no solid plan. I had seen up until that point, there were not very many young living couples living this reality. This was before.
What can I do to help?
This was, somebody needs to mute themselves if you don't mind. I don't know what happened.
You really hungry? I'm sure.
Can you check and see if you're muted?
And then almond butter again.
How do I mute everybody?
Just, I won't touch it. I just want to see it. Did you put the oil on it?
Hold on. Okay, can you still hear me? Okay, sorry about that. So we hadn't seen other couples really do this except for a handful of them. And the ones that I saw doing this, they were like all in together. Like they were the young living couple and the husband retired and came alongside his wife and they were doing it together. And that does happen. That is the reality for some people in Young Living. And that's awesome. That's great. They are like the unicorns in our company. That was not us. And I think I can say with confidence that that's probably not the majority. That doesn't happen for the majority of Young Living leaders who bring home their husbands. We just basically assumed that I shouldn't say we. I assumed that what I saw these other couples doing, that was going to be us. And we didn't even discuss it because it was just like we escaped from chaos and he came home and everything was supposed to be great. So my expectations were not met. That was not my husband's fault, but we had no one mentoring us. We had no plan. We went from hardly seeing each other to seeing each other all the time. And I got to say, having lunch dates together while the kids are at school is awesome. I love it. But the novelty of that kind of wears off pretty quickly. We still do it today and it's great, but we try to keep it, once a week, once every 2 weeks. And so it was hard on our marriage. There was a lot of conflict. We also made a major move. We changed counties, schools, and churches all at the same time, right after he retired. And then after that, we moved again last summer. So it was really like way too much change all at once. And that's hard on a marriage. So one thing I did that helped was I hired an assistant to actually be in my home 4 days a week to kind of help manage household tasks. And then she also helps me with some of the things that I assumed Troy would do, like go to the post office. Well, that's like really demeaning. He doesn't need to be going to the post office for me. So I do have my assistant do that now, and that has made a big difference and a positive impact on our marriage for sure, because it allowed, then I wasn't resenting him for maybe not doing the dishes or, sounds silly and petty, but hey, that's marriage. However, when you do hire an assistant and bring them into your home, there's a huge loss of privacy. So it's a mixed blessing, I'll put it that way. It will be 4 years since he came home this January. I will say that he has threatened many times to go back to work. And typically it's during a conflict, people argue when they're married. That's normal. He has definitely felt judged by other men. I don't know if they were really judging him or if it was just his own insecurity. Other men look at him like, well, what? You're not the breadwinner, your wife is. It's just, and I will tell you this, we still struggle to this day, even now, when someone asks us what we do or what he does or what I do, we fumble over that question still. Like, we're not good at answering that or explaining that. And sometimes I just don't even talk about it. I like to be super anonymous at school and at church and just not talk about it unless someone asks. And then it's like fumbling. Other men have actually told my husband that they're jealous, which is also a really uncomfortable situation to be in. It's just weird. He is super involved now as a dad, and it's awesome, and I'm so thankful. But I am still the mom in the house. Like, we stay in our roles. We have a weekly schedule that works for us very well. It's not perfect, but it's a whole lot better than it was because we're 4 years into this. I will say we are both much happier people when we are exercising regularly. That's another thing that has helped. And I want you to know he is not involved in the day-to-day of my Young Living business. That's me, and it probably always will be. He doesn't teach with me. It's just not his passion. He takes care of all the financials. So, we have an S-Corp. He takes care of all the taxes and the investments, and that's his role, and he's happy with that. And then, of course, he has other passions that he is pursuing as well that fulfill him, that give him, purpose, and that's really important. But I want to tell you that every single year at convention, he's by my side, and I want him there. I want him to be acknowledged for his role in this. He puts on the tuxedo, and basically he's my biggest supporter, and he has been since day one with Young Living. And I wouldn't have the team that I have without his support and his encouragement. Even though it hasn't been an easy road, he's always been that support. And so that's why that's important to me. I want to tell you, though, don't mistake support and a love of Young Living products that you might see in your husband now. Don't mistake that for a desire to jump all in and do this business as a couple, because those are two totally different things, okay? Your husband might love the products and love the company and cheer you on to build your business, but that doesn't mean that he wants to go all in with you. Don't compare. Every single marriage and every single story that every leader would tell you about retiring their husband would look different. And everyone has to kind of figure out their own thing. No two marriages are going to look the same ever. And I will finish with this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Myra and let her share her story. Retiring your husband is not a good why. Okay? It's just not. Because once you accomplish that, then what? And why are you retiring him? Are you retiring him so that he can come home and help you with the business or help you with the kids more? I would say reframe it. I know a lot of you were talking about how stressed out your husbands are and they want to come home, and I totally get that. But reframe it and use language like, I want him to be able to leave one career to be able to pursue other passions. That's just a much better way of looking at it. And it's less glamorous than saying, I want to retire my spouse. So that is my story. And Myra, can you unmute yourself? And I'd love to hear what you have to share tonight. Thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Can you hear me? Perfect. So, I've been breathing my oils in really a lot tonight, and it's been a little bit dramatic getting on this call, but I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really excited to share our story because retiring your husband is very over-glamorized. So I'm really glad that we are taking the glamour out of it and giving you a real life look at our reality. So I never anticipated that this business would perhaps bring Ernie home from his job. My background is in blogging. That's how I met Alyssa. And I built a really good blog, and I was making a full-time income through my blog, and it was blessing our family, and we were very, 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 very slowly getting out of debt. But I never once thought, Ernie could come home and work with me from home because of my blog. I never thought that until I joined Young Living, and then I would hear people talk about retiring their husbands, and I was like, maybe I could use some help around the house. I need my husband home. Anyway, I was mistaken about that. So anyway, Ernie worked at a steel mill, and he had gone from a production job, which was very messy, very dirty, very, very dangerous, to a desk job programming. And he fell in love with Geek Monkey coding, and he loved it. He just loved his job, and he was very good at it. But then we started, having this Young Living paycheck that was growing, and we were like, well, this has never happened before. And then we started paying off debt, and then he went and talked to his boss, and his boss was like, why are you still here? And so he left his job to come home, and this was in December. It will be 3 years. So it was just after we hit Diamond. We hit Diamond in July of that year, and then he left his job to come home in December. So our number one mistake was that we didn't communicate about what this was going to look like. We didn't talk about, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do. These are your dreams. These are my dreams. We didn't communicate about the nuts and bolts of this major, major life change. I mean, you go from, being around your spouse for a few hours in the evening, a couple hours in the morning, or, a few days gone, maybe they're gone for a few days during the week, whatever it is, being together 24/7 is pretty major, like major life change. So as a mom, the bottom line is that I needed help. And I felt like, oh yes, an extra set of hands with the kids and housework and yard work and homeschooling. I mean, it sounded amazing. But in his mind, he was like, I'm going to pursue my passions. And his passion is not Young Living. And that's okay. That's okay now. That was not okay then. We love where we are now, but he loves his coding, and he loves reading, and he loves writing. He's very much of a dreamer. Like he always says this, I have an idea. And I go, oh, what's that? And he's also in seminary. He loves to pursue those things. So I made a request as a wife, and I said, would you consider taking off a year and not do anything? Like just adjust, enjoy life, and do nothing except read, write, your favorite things. Well, he didn't listen. And he'll tell you now that that was a mistake, but he didn't know that that was a mistake then. Some of you know of the app, Oily app. Well, he jumped right into that baby and was stuck behind a computer 24/7. And the resentment was strong. The resentment was strong on both sides, because he was like, oh, I'm doing this. I have purpose. And I was like, but I needed help. And so it was just really, it was not a match made in heaven at that point. With our ideas were like going opposite directions. So there weren't a lot, like Alyssa said, there were not a lot of husbands and couples at that point who had done this that we really knew. There were other people in the company, yes, but not anybody that we really were close with. And so we were really kind of flying blind. So we really had no clue what we were doing. I just want to mention that I know some of you have seen these Young Living couples who do nothing but Young Living. And I want to tell you that they are the anomaly. They are not normal, okay? And I love them to death, and I admire them beyond words, but they're the anomaly. So the chances of your husband being like these amazing dads and fathers and husbands, and it's probably pretty low. Okay. So very few men want to come home and be a house husband. Okay. They don't. They need to have a calling and a passion. And I think that one way to get around the struggle of them not being the breadwinner is that they be able to fulfill their passion and their calling, whatever that is. So we had major conflict, major struggle, and so many unmet expectations because we just didn't communicate. So we really didn't like each other for a long time. That's keeping it real. So I don't really, when people talk about, oh, I want my husband to be a Young Living husband, I don't really consider Ernie a Young Living husband, but it probably depends on what your definition is, right? Because everybody would have a different definition of what that looks like, because everybody's different, right? So my opinion is that nobody ever needs to feel crammed into whatever little box that we have formed in our minds about what your marriage should look like, your business should look like, how your home should operate, how you parent. Like that's you, and you're unique to you. You cannot compare yourself to somebody else's journey. You can't. So Ernie's primary calling is not Young Living. And it's taken me a really, really, really long time to come to that acceptance. I probably should have started using that oil a really long time ago. But I don't think that you need to be, or your husband has to be, a young living husband to really have a great marriage and a great business and a great successful life. I am really thankful for the connections. Some of you probably have heard of the Essentially Equipped Facebook group, and it has been really, really vital for Ernie because he has formed really deep cross-line and downline relationships with men and made friends, like real genuine friendships where they talk and they text and have their bromances. And I'm like, oh, you're talking to whoever again. And that used to really annoy me, but Ernie needs friends too. Like, I have all these friends in Young Living, and it was important to him to have some friends. And I mean, he has friends around here too, but just making those really good friendships and those connections has been just really, really important to his adjustment and kind of finding his place in our business. So one other thing I want to say about Ernie's involvement is that it's changed. So at the beginning, it was like, honey, can you make a Google form? And now, he's handling all of the back end stuff. Like, he helps me come up with giveaways, and he works with our assistant on, communicating information from giveaways or whatever. I mean, she does so much stuff to help us. So we're in a very, very good place now because we have finally figured out communication. And that's the first tip that I have for you is communication. We are weird, but we sit down and talk at the beginning of every week. We sit down on Sunday with our day planners, both of us, like, hardcore day planners, not just our phones. And we plan out the entire week. We plan who's doing school, who's working out when. Like Alyssa said, exercise is so important to mental health. We communicate literally about everything, and everything goes on our day planner. So that has been huge too, because that sets expectations so that you're not like, oh, well, I didn't know about that. And because that is no-go. The next thing is that we have to give each other space and time to grow. And so if you're thinking about your husband coming home, there's going to be a big adjustment period. And so just recognizing that and being ready for it and giving each other grace and forgiveness every day is just the best way for a nice, clean slate. The next thing is to just really set aside time for each other, because when you're constantly at home, constantly with the kids, constantly working, your to-do list is never done. That's how it is when you work from home. And it's really, really important to just get away and have a date night, even if it's every 2 weeks. Just get away and have some non-business one-on-one time. The next thing is to get help. Alyssa mentioned her assistant. And I at first I felt guilty, like I should be handling all this because I'm a wife and a mom, and that's what wives and moms do. They do everything. Well, I had to realize that I couldn't do everything because my free time, I want to spend making memories with my kids. I don't want to spend time cleaning my toilets. So I have somebody who cleans my house, and my assistant does all of my mailing. And it's just such a blessing to be able to say, I don't have to do this. So there's no shame in getting help. Dividing and conquering is like the name of the game. So Ernie handles like all of the numbers stuff, taxes, all that, buying stuff, paying bills. I don't want to know any. I'm just like, do I have money? Okay, I got money. Good. I'm good to go. And so then the last thing I want to mention again is to nurture friendships outside your marriage, because like, again, when you're around each other 24/7, it's really important to get out away from home and have some good old girl time or good old guy time and really invest in other people, because you need those friendships because they make you better. So I really think that it's important to have a life goal or a calling together as a couple, even if you're like, his calling's not Young Living and yours is, or whatever. Just have a life goal or something that you feel called to together that will bring you together. Ernie and I both feel very strongly about hospitality, and we really want to bless people with hospitality and be able to open our home at a moment's notice and just say, come for supper. You're always welcome. Our door's always open. And so that is something that we work on together, and we look for opportunities to serve people that way. So anyway, I think that's all that I have. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, can you all hear me? Good. All right. Well, I was just thinking through this. Myra and Alyssa and I have a lot of similarities to our stories. There's just so many. And I'm thinking back to when Jonathan came home, and Jonathan came home shortly before we hit gold. So he came home very early, and the reason being is that he worked for a nonprofit, and it didn't really take a whole lot, honestly, to replace his salary. And so we kind of decided, like, we saw that our income was increasing and we were getting closer to gold, and we were like, okay, like, we can totally live on this. And at the time too, with him, he did not like his job at all. Like, he got stuck he's very extroverted. He got stuck in a cubicle. So he was like going crazy that they stuck him in a corner. And so I was kind of like, okay, babe, like it's time to go, I mean, it's time to finish up with this. And so we look at it today, and a couple times he looked back and said, maybe I should have just, maybe I should have stayed and worked. And I was like, he was just kind of imploding. And so that was that was what we felt was good for us. But at the same time, I thought I was doing him this big favor, right? Of like helping him get out of a job and stuff. And the thing is that it seemed that way at first because he did get out of a really hard situation. But at the same time, it was not necessarily doing him a favor. It was really hard for us when he came home. He went through a lot of different emotions that, like Alyssa and Myra were talking about, like nobody talks about this stuff. He went through all these different emotions from being angry. He went through feeling guilty that he wasn't providing for the family. He went through just struggling with finding his purpose and just not being the one to bring home a paycheck. And so I, of course, beforehand, I had no idea. Like, he did want to retire. And I say that word, like, and Melissa kind of said this, I don't like using that word. Like, and he hates that word. He's like, because it makes them feel like they're just going to do nothing, to retire and just sit around and, piddle around. And so I think even as wives, as we're supporting our husbands in their calling, that even the word retirement, we need to be really careful with that word. Because some husbands, maybe some husbands like that word, and maybe you need to communicate about that, but I've found very few that seem to like that word. Most of them really don't love that word. So that's the thing, like, communicate, like Myra said, a lot. There are husbands out there that do want to be the stay-at-home dad, but I do think they're few and far between. Jonathan is not one of those guys at all. And actually, I don't think he'd mind if I told the story, but he was at Lowe's Hardware the other day, and a guy that we know who's a landscaper, and that goes to our church, called like, "Hey, Mr. Mom," like across the place. And of course, everybody turns around and looks at him. And like, that's the thing, like Alyssa was talking about, like, as men, they worry about people judging them or even thinking that like they're not doing anything. And like Alyssa and Myra said, Jonathan handles all the number stuff. Like, I could not run my business without him, but most people don't see him in front of the scenes. And I have to encourage him really often with that like, he feels like he's not doing anything because he might not be the face of the business, but I literally like, like, if you can't pay your taxes, you're kind of in trouble, And so that's the thing, like, he runs all that stuff. And so I need him to run that stuff. I need him to do those things. So that, I think, is just something to keep in mind when you're thinking through this process. And so a lot of the things, as I thought through this process, were a lot of the same things that Myra and Alyssa talked about. You really, really just need a plan. You need to have open communication. You need to have a plan. And I've actually told Jonathan a lot lately about what Myra and Ernie do, that they sit down every week. I've heard her say that several times. And so I keep telling him, we used to live in it. We just moved recently, and we had a big calendar up on the wall, and we would make sure we knew what was on the calendar all the time. Well, when we moved, we don't have that right now. And I'm like, we need to sit down, and like, it really is hard if you don't know what's on the calendar. So planning's huge. Communication's huge. Like, I remember back when we had some really difficult arguments, and he would get so upset with me about working too much. And honestly, like, I'm not one of those diamonds. Like, there are some diamonds that work a lot, and I'm not one of those people that works all the time. Although you do have to be careful, and a lot of you probably already know this from having your home business, that you can work all the time. And so he got so angry at working at me. We're bringing home this 5-figure a month salary, and he's like telling me I need to quit. And we've had those kind of arguments, like, that I need to, you need to quit. And so I think, like, but the problem always was the communication, the planning, like, going back to that. And when he quit his job, I think my desire for him was, I want you to do what you're passionate about. It was funny because when he first quit, like everybody else, I think he was trying to find his role, and you get this great ideal in your head, like, oh yeah, I want him to do all this stuff in my Young Living business. So he was doing approvals for my Facebook group. And I came to the realization, even, like, I'm like, he does not need to do that. Like, it's kind of like tedious. And he hated it. He just hated it. And I was like, Jonathan, you just don't need to do that. Well, he actually got upset with me that I kind of like gave it to an assistant, because he just really didn't have anything else to do. And he would tell you, that it's okay. I know some of you, I saw in your comments that some of your husbands have had a hard time even like figuring out what their passions are. He actually ended up getting a life coach, and has been working with this coach for the past year, and it's been an incredible transformation. Incredible. And he wasn't ready for it. It took him a year to want to get coaching, and then it's been a year since coaching. And so at the same time, I wouldn't go like pushing coaching on your husband, because he might, have a hard time with that too. But this was an ongoing conversation for a year. And so if they do struggle with any of those things and they're willing to be coached, it could be a very good option. And I feel like he's really been able to hone in on his gifts that way. So it is taking us, like, I literally feel like only in the past 2 or 3 months that we really started to get a groove on. And I mean, he quit in 2014 from his job. It is 2017. It took a while. So just remember that it's okay. It's okay, one, if he doesn't want to quit right away, that's okay. You can keep having that discussion. I think the best thing about this business is not necessarily retiring your husband, but it is being able to really design your life in the way you want it. And that is priceless. Thanks, Myra. I mean, that is priceless. That is what freedom is really being able to design your way in a way you feel called, and in a way that you're excited about and passionate about. And so I think sometimes we get so caught up in, retiring your husband, which sounds all great and dandy, but it's just not all the time. I mean, it's great. Now it's great, but it took a long time to get here, and it took a lot of tears. A lot of tears. But I think if we would have approached it in a different way, it would have been different. You know, like if we would have known this stuff beforehand, it would have been really, really different. And so I'm glad that Alyssa put this together, because it's good for you guys to think about that ahead of time, because I think not only will it help your marriage, because I think there are a lot of marriage problems in this industry for that reason. Not only will it help your marriage now and later, but it'll also help you really achieve the goal of that freedom lifestyle. Like, we want to have the opportunity to be generous. We want to have the opportunity to be good stewards of our time. We want to have the opportunity to have that time freedom. And we can do that with this business, but we also have to be able to be in that right frame of mind. So like Alyssa, or like Myra was talking about, don't be afraid to, hire things out eventually when you're able to. Especially those little things that you don't have to do. I have an assistant. My assistant is amazing. She does all my mailing. She does my Facebook approvals now. Jonathan is writing a book. He can go write his book. He also runs a rental property that we have now, and he takes care of all that. He does all of our finances. He does all of our investing. He's been able to connect with other guys to even talk over that stuff, which has been awesome for him. So it's already been said, but I'm just going to say it again because it's important. But don't compare your story. Don't compare your situation. Don't compare your husband to other husbands. Believe the best in him all the time. Always be his cheerleader, and hopefully he's yours too. I really hope that he's cheering you on too. But yeah, like I feel like it's awesome now, because the more I've seen him grow, and I always wanted, these things for his life, that the more I've seen him be able to bloom in those things too. So I think that is pretty much all I had. But yeah, there you all go.
Good
So,
stuff.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Becky. I just have a few closing thoughts to share with everybody before we hop off. First, again, huge thanks to Myra and Becky for joining me with this crazy idea. And I'm excited that we opened up this conversation. And I hope that this conversation will continue to happen, so that there are fewer people saying down the road, well, nobody told me. Nobody told me it was going to be this hard. We want to tell you. We want to tell you the truth. One thing to be aware of, I've attended just enough industry events to know, not very many, just enough, that the divorce rate among very high earners is pretty bad. It's high. So, I mean, money can change a marriage. So be aware of that. I think it's not as high in Young Living, but I know of at least 4 Young Living Diamond couples just since I've been in the company that have either gone through a divorce or are going through one right now. So I don't take this topic lightly, you guys. Like, this is important. We want strong marriages. Young Living is about more than just oils and a paycheck. Like, we want wellness in all areas of your life, including your marriage. And one of the ways to achieve that is just by communicating openly and honestly about topics like this. And yeah, that's important to me very much. I just want to share a few quick tips and questions that I actually asked a mentor of mine to share. He happens to be a diamond husband in Young Living. He's not from Oily Families, but he's a coach. So I'm going to close with these because I think they're very valuable, because they're from a husband. They're not from just me. So first, he says, questions to ask yourself as the wife in this situation. Why do you want to retire your husband? What does he want? What will he do when he comes home? That would have been a really valuable question to know the answer to before Troy came home. Common sense. What will you do or say if he doesn't want to retire, if he wants to continue working? How is that going to affect you? How will this help the two of you reach your goals sooner if he does retire? How will this help you reach your goals? That means you have to talk about your goals, right? And then from the guy's perspective, he says that this should be a joint decision. It should involve a joint plan where roles are discussed and the potential value to be added is identified. Both sides need to envision what it could look like when he's home. Again, all things I wish someone had told me 4 years ago. He needs time to make the transition. If he's worked for the last 20 years, it is very challenging to come home and just start a new career. I thought this was a great tip. Osmosis is not a learning environment. Just because he's listened to you for the past 4 years does not mean he understands how your business works. He will need time to learn your business. And then I'm going to add a caveat. If he wants to learn your business, he might not want to, and you have to be okay with that. So, in conclusion, Eric says, helping him leave his job gives him freedom to pursue his passion and dream. No more grind, no more commuting, just working on what he always wanted to work on, and that is a good reason. That is a good why. So I'm going to close with that. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to be here, and this was recorded, so I will share that later in the group, and I hope this was helpful to all of you. So I'm going to unmute, and you guys can say bye.
Yeah.
Okay, you're all unmuted.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, the baby sounds. Oh. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Thank you.